Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. You know, the allergies
yeah.
are starting to get to me.
I know.
But it's totally worth it. Allergies is one of those things where it's like they're a pain in the butt, but at the same time, they mean they're a harbinger of spring.
Yeah.
And so you have the flowers, you have the leaves, and in our neck of the woods, the trees have gone from sort of a flowery bloom into more of the greenery, which is, it's fun to watch that transition.
It's nice. Spring has sprung.
Spring has sprung.
And so too have our social skills, right?
Right.
And related to that, we're talking about productivity today because this is, you know, productivity is something that is really important. We value it extremely in our business and for our own mental wellness and well-being and all that. And we're going to get into that, what that means exactly.
Yeah.
But also in this climate, right, a lot of people are working from home. And if you are, you know, that's an amazing thing. You're getting a paycheck, you're preoccupied with some good things, right? You have some nice distractions during this time, which I think we all welcome. And so, you know, this is a very important part of communication, collaboration, and for our own mental well-being as well.
The productivity element.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's funny, talking about productivity more generally, there was a really good discussion on Cal Newport, who we've mentioned, I think, in the last episode. He's a professor who is in Georgetown.
Right.
Georgetown. We always said he was on the West Coast. We were totally wrong.
Yeah.
He's in Georgetown. Anyways, fantastic. In his late 30s, done a lot of really good research and books.
He's written so many books.
I know, extremely prolific writer, but is a computer scientist by trade.
Yeah.
And in any event, one of the distinctions he makes is between productivity in the sort of manufacturing, sort of assembly line sense.
Like factory style.
Right, input in, input out kind of thing. Effort in, input out. And the sense of fulfillment you get from a job well done, right? And so those are two different things. And I think when some people, they have a negative association with productivity because they view it as this sort of exploitative concept that emerged from factories trying to get as much as they could from their employees. And
back to the grind.
Yeah, back to,
you know, all in.
Exactly. More hours means more output, right? How many widgets can you produce? Which is actually very relevant right now in terms of masks, but and other PPE.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But the point is, when we talk about productivity, that's one component of it. But our focus is more so on the sense of fulfillment you get from a job well done, from setting your mind to something and getting through it and staying focused during that process. That's what, when we say productivity here, that's really what we're talking about. And I think that's the kind of productivity that you want to strive for.
Definitely. And it's also something that will keep you going, right? It's not one of these like one and done kind of things. Oh, I, you know, checked that off my to-do list. That was super productive, right? It's more so like thinking of it holistically and every day, you know, putting in the hours, maybe not completing that task that day, but every day putting the work in and seeing progress and feeling progress. And then you have this sense of accomplishment at the end of the day, which is so gratifying, right?
Totally. I mean, the consistency part of it that you just brought up is frankly, in my view, one of the most important and under or overlooked aspects of productivity. And I get why. Because it's way easier to, you know, talk about really effective ways to juice the most you can out of the few, you know, minutes or hours that you have to do something. But really, when it comes down to it, where the rubber meets the road is how often you do something, right?
Totally. I mean, that's where you see the results.
Right.
Anything you do. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if, you know, you can work for 30 minutes, and it can be the most productive 30 minutes of your life. But if you only do it, once every few weeks, you're not going to get that much done. Whereas if you put that same amount of time in, or even less, but you do it every single day, you can get a lot more done.
Definitely. There's this great book, My Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. We've mentioned it on the channel before. And part of what he talks about, like he sets up his day for productivity, right? And so he has this morning routine, and sure, that might not be for everyone, but even if you do just one thing to establish this routine or this ritual, you can get so much done. So in the book, he talks about just reading 10 pages of a book, right, of your choice. 10 pages a day, every day, is a lot of books at the end of the year, right? So we might scoff at, 10 pages, that's nothing. I'm not going to learn anything from 10 pages. Like, you might say that to yourself. But over time, 10 pages, that's just a couple of weeks to finish maybe one book, right? Depending on the length.
It adds up.
It adds up. And so consistency is king, consistency is queen, right? I mean, we really
rules.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. The mind isn't very good at conceptualizing cumulative progress, right? We're very oriented toward what we're producing in that very moment, what we're achieving in that very moment. We have a much harder time understanding what can be achieved over time.
And the bigger picture, right?
Yeah. And I feel like that specific challenge is what drives a lot of stress in the workplace, because everything feels so urgent, like it has to happen this very minute.
Yeah,
otherwise, everything's going to fall apart, right? Everything has to happen. When in reality, most things can get done in a perfectly sufficient and comprehensive way. And frankly, they get done in a lower...
low stress.
Well, I just mean there'll be fewer errors when you do it consistently and methodically over time. And the routine, like you're saying, is such a good way to achieve that. Because what a routine does is it sets some parameters, right? It sets some guidelines for you. Some, what do you call the guardrails? It sets some guardrails, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like when you're bowling.
Like you're bowling, right. And we've all used the guardrails at least once.
Totally, and there's no shame in that, right? And so you're somebody who's Greg's someone who's very systems-oriented, routine-oriented, which is great. I mean, I admire him so much for so many things, but that's one of them. Me, on the other hand, I don't really like doing the same exact thing every single day in terms of a routine, right? But I've definitely played around with, because I know the value of establishing routines and setting your day up for success. So there are things that I'll do every morning before, like maybe having a cup of coffee or two.
Cocoa.
And cocoa.
Cocoa nowadays.
Yeah, totally. Reading a couple pages from my book, maybe checking my schedule and doing my workout, right? So I noticed that I actually do these things every day before I start my work day, and that's a routine, even though I wasn't cognizant of that formal routine. So what I'm saying is, you might be someone who's sort of routine averse, but
it's like that.
Yeah.
Freestyle.
Exactly. Kind of spontaneous. You still get the job done, but try to think about something that you do every single day, even if it's, getting up and walking over to the window and, opening the curtains, right? That could be your routine. And it doesn't have to be like this big, elaborate, fancy, glamorous, thing, because that's intimidating, especially for someone who doesn't really like that idea. But it is very productive. Go ahead.
Yeah, the concept of a routine, I think, gets a lot of criticism from creative types, and there's a stigma against it being an impediment to free-form thought and so forth.
Yeah.
Which, taken to extreme, it can be.
Totally,
right?
because it's rigid, right? It doesn't allow you to get out of that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at education systems around the world, particularly in Asia, you have some very rigid systems that don't really allow for creative thought, because literally every minute of your day is structured, and you have to be doing this and that, and you're working, with this specific like assignment. It's just very, very regimented. I know, because I've taught in that environment.
Right.
Whereas you go to other parts of the world, and I think Europe probably does the best job of this, where it's much more a free-form classroom, where students are encouraged to sort of pursue their interests. But even in those free-form classrooms,
there's still structure.
You still have the time of day that you start class.
Absolutely.
You still have a teacher, right, who's giving a prompt that the kids can start to riff off of.
Yeah.
So just because you have some structure doesn't mean there's not room for creativity.
Absolutely.
And in fact, having a bit of structure can really free up the cognitive space for creativity.
Totally.
Right? Because then your mind isn't worried about, okay, when should I start? When should I do this? It gets all of those, what I find to be stressful choices, out of the way for you to do your best work.
Right. It's funny you mentioned the school system, because you're absolutely right. Maria Montessori, I believe, so an Italian educator, and she came up with the Montessori method, which is widely touted as, and as an educator, I can attest to this methodology. It's particularly wonderful for younger children to develop autonomous learning, right? And autonomy is something very relevant in today's world of working from home, right? Because no one's breathing down your neck telling you do this, do that, and then do that over there, right? You have to have that intrinsic motivation to be able to sit yourself at your computer, crank out those emails, send those reports, etc. So that autonomy is so essential to your productivity, right? So back to the Maria Montessori method, one of the ways that methodology works so well, the pedagogy, is they have the students, think young learners like kindergarten, first grade. There's an array of activities for them to do, and they set time, maybe an hour, and they say, okay, have at all these activities that you want. You can do that one over there, whatever strikes your fancy, and they'll go and do that, right? And
so you give them the choice of activities.
There's a choice
that they can opt into.
Exactly, very much like, right, there's the structure around there, but it's not as regimented, as severe as, okay, everyone's going to do this activity first, and then we're all going to move to this activity.
Right.
The learner, the student can just
they have agency.
And that develops autonomous learning. And so
right.
that idea of autonomy is so important.
And it sounds silly to be talking about, a primary school activity in the context of professional work environments. But the reality is, the sort of mental frameworks that you develop and resourcefulness that you develop at that age carries through and applies very much to what we do nowadays, right? And like you're saying, the ability to proactively identify where your value is greatest is a huge asset to your employer or to your business if you're running your own business. It's a huge asset. And so by creating some systems that allow you to make those decisions in a smart, intelligent way, and cultivating that sense of choice and agency can be very, very useful for increasing your productivity when, like you're saying, you don't have a clear structure or someone sitting next to you saying this is what you should be doing.
Exactly. And I think, entrepreneurs also sort of learn how to do this. Sometimes by trial and error, sometimes they read a phenomenal book, right? How to be an entrepreneur. I don't even know if one like that exists.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Whether it's good or not is a separate question.
Yeah, exactly. But prioritizing your tasks and prioritizing what you need to do first, what needs your attention is so, sometimes it's actually difficult, but it's so important, right? And if somebody is not there telling you what needs to be done, you need to figure out what that is, right? So oftentimes entrepreneurs are able to do this because, they're running their own business, or they can see the immediacy.
Well, they're forced to do it. They have no choice.
They're forced to do it, right, of the task at hand and what needs their attention first. But it's not always evident when we're, working for someone else. We're in a more structured job. There are a lot of people on our team. So being able to recognize our priorities is also a great skill to have, not just when you're working remotely, but when you go back into the office.
Yeah.
It just increases your productivity.
And one of the ways I've found to be able to step back and assess your priorities, right? Because it's one thing to say, just figure out what's most important and work on it.
Right.
Okay, how do you figure out what's most important?
Yeah.
One of the best tools for that, one of the best exercises you can do is building in a reflection period during your day in this routine that we're talking about. And generally the best time to do that is the last hour of work. And an hour might seem like a long time, but it's an hour very, very well spent, right? Reflecting on what you accomplished that day, what you planned to accomplish, and what did you actually get done, and determining if you didn't get through it all, why was that the case, and to what extent should the rest of that get pushed to tomorrow. And then at the end of your week, it's also, I like to build in a second period of reflection. This is a little further up, a higher elevation, looking at your week. What did you get accomplished that week? Was it what you intended to accomplish? If not, how can you better manage your time in the coming weeks to sort of more effectively get through your to-dos? Totally. But building in these periods of reflection allows you to take a sort of a meta perspective of what you're doing. It gets you out of the immediate moment and thinking more strategically. And this sometimes sounds like something, if you're just getting started at work, that this is something that your manager is doing or your manager's manager. But the truth is, at every level of a business, you want people doing this because we're all capable of it. And the more aligned we are individually with what needs to be done, the more effectively we can work as a team to get things done.
That's so true. I love that suggestion as well. Yeah. And especially, it's important to see where your time went, right? So I love this idea of doing it at the end of the day as a reflection. If you feel I think another way, I love that. You can also do it after each activity. That it might disturb your flow. So I think in that case, maybe at the end of the day is really good.
Could be at least choose one day where you do that, right?
Yeah,
just to get in the rhythm of reflecting.
Right. So maybe like I'm envisioning where you have, your time blocking, which is something that we suggested in this week's lesson. So have everything regimented, let's just say. And then on the side, so not on the side, but you make another event. So if you're familiar with Google Calendar, you make another event for that same time blocked period, so 9 to 10 a.m. What did you actually do from 9 to 10 a.m., right? Do you catch my drift?
So are you saying you have the activity booked?
Yes.
So and then after the activity, you have a time booked to reflect on that activity? Is that what you're saying?
No, but that's also really good. Because that's the second way you can do it. There's so many ways to do this. The third way, really, you can do this is, so 9 to 10 a.m., you have meeting. Okay, a Zoom meeting. 10 to 11 a.m., you have, a proposal to write. 11 to 12 a.m., you have, 12 p.m., you have, I don't know.
A conference call.
Okay, so now that's what you had to do, right? Then you you put another event, and Google will automatically put it on the side. So you see two columns in that space.
Oh, okay.
What did you actually do from 9 to 10 a.m.?
Oh,
do you know what I'm saying?
I see. So I love this. So basically,
if you're visual, like
yeah,
because you're also really visual, but I think your style works really well for you. For me, I would forget what I actually did.
Yeah. So I like it. So basically, because I know exactly what you're getting at. a lot of us have these aspirational calendars, right? So you preemptively put up how I'm going to use my time this day. Then you have the actual way that you use that time. And so by putting that into the calendar, you can see how closely your actual day lined up with your hypothetical sort of platonic ideal of a day.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. That's a cool idea. I like that. And that, again, it's a reflective exercise that sort of holds yourself accountable for the way in which you use your time.
Totally. So there are different ways of approaching the time blocking, but if you actually see where your time went and how you allocated it, then you're more aware and you're more cognizant of how fast it might be for you to complete a task, how long it might take rather.
Yeah.
And be more productive because you understand time better.
Right.
It's a time management thing.
Right, yeah, and there's another component to this that I think is useful, and it's applicable more broadly, which is testing the extremes, right? So you described a day where every hour is time blocked. For me, I would consider that extreme.
Totally.
Right? Like that's a lot more structure than I typically put in my day. I generally have a couple things. And I think in your video you talk about having just 3 things. I think that's a good number to sort of get through during the day. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't at least try the extremes. Because what the extremes do is help you get a sense of what's too much and what's too little.
Totally.
Right? So go through a day with no structure, see how it goes. Then go through a day with just insane structure where like...
Even lunch breaks are penciled in.
Totally. You pencil in the 10-minute walk to, wherever you're picking up lunch. Well, these days, I guess it's your kitchen counter.
Right.
But the point is, go and try out both extremes, because by trying the extremes, they may be way further away from what you actually do.
Right.
But they give you a sense of what's possible on either side. And then it helps you calibrate where you want to end up in the middle.
That is a phenomenal exercise that you can do, because it'll help you understand your own productivity mechanisms and then the time management. The other thing that you can consider when you come up with your own, like when you've calibrated it.
I'm going to read this.
Sure. Is to structure your day so that you have, like, let's say 1 hour of, and you can even label it, random stuff. And by that I mean, let's say somebody, from work calls you and there's something that you need to address with immediacy. We're talking about the random time. Right. So you schedule that in. Maybe it's 15 minutes. Maybe it's 1 hour at the end of the day. You can do that intermittently throughout the day, like schedule in a 10-minute random time. And if nothing urgent, or if you don't need to be on a call with somebody from work or answer an email that you weren't expecting for work, then you can use that time to maybe, do something like read a book, or you take that time for you.
Yeah, I like the idea of proactively using the extra time, because often when something like that happens, what we end up doing is just extending the amount of time that we were working on
the activity.
Yeah. Right, and that's not necessarily what you want to do. There's a really good phrase, which is that basically, how does this go? The amount of time sort of expands to fill the space that you give it. The amount of time it takes to do something expands to the space that you give for it.
Like a fish in a fishbowl, right? If you give it a bigger fishbowl,
it gets bigger.
It'll get bigger.
But the thing is, this is kind of a negative thing. It's a kind of a negative thing, right? Because what I'm saying is, if you give yourself 3 hours to do a certain task, more likely than not, you're going to use those 3 hours to get the task done.
Yeah.
If you give yourself half an hour to do that task, you're going to have to completely rethink how to do that task. But you will, if it needs to get done, you will figure out a way to get it done in 30 minutes. And maybe it was 90%, if we're going to the Pareto Principle, it's 80% as good.
Okay.
But most of the time, 80% is all you need. And you got it to 80% of the quality in 1/3, and not even 1/6 of the original time. And so remembering that, the amount of time it takes will expand to fill the space you give it, it's sort of a way of forcing yourself to think, how efficiently can I get something done?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And the more aggressive you are with your time blocks in terms of keeping them compressed, the more likely you are to be more productive in those periods of time.
Absolutely. And if the same principle holds true, remind us the name Pareto Principle, right?
Yeah, it's like Pareto rule.
Right. It's the 80-20
80-20
rule.
Yeah.
Same thing. There's research that supports that children who are in extracurricular activities after school, they have these commitments, sports, theater, arts, whatever, are actually, they have less time to get their homework done, but they're actually performing better in school because of this approach, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't have as much time as somebody who doesn't have any extracurricular activities, who actually maybe has more time.
Totally.
They don't perform as well. So it's the same idea where if you give yourself less time to complete an activity, you might actually exceed your own expectations.
Yeah.
And therefore you'll get more done because...
Yeah. And what's neat about these things is, Alcyon, I'm not good at pronouncing that name, but she mentioned how, or he mentioned that this is something that's very useful for teaching from home, right? This is the first time they've had to teach from home, and being able to manage your time effectively is important. And that's totally true. These productivity strategies are very useful for working in a less structured environment. But what's also really cool is that they become part of your process, and you can take that when life resumes, normalcy.
Yeah.
And you're back in a classroom in a school.
Right.
You can use these same principles to be even more effective than you were previously. So that's what I love about developing these skills now. This is an opportunity to really refine and enhance these capabilities so that later on, when you return to
whatever normal looks like.
Yeah, whatever normal looks like for you, you can do even better at what you used to do. It's a great opportunity to upgrade your skill set.
Absolutely. And I think, it's misleading thinking about, well, what are the skills I need to develop for working from home, working remotely? In fact, you can, like Greg said, get better at developing this skill set and then take it to a non-remote environment, right? And you'll be amazed and impressed with yourself. And also the people around you working with you will be too. So all good things, right?
Yeah. And that's what we like to do on this channel in general is focus on topics and core skill sets that are applicable to a wide range of activities, not just professional, but also personal, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
When I go on vacation, I want to make sure I'm making the most use of the time that I have, right?
Totally.
It's precious time. So you want to be productive. You want to make sure that you get the activities in that you wanted to get done, and that you leave space for enjoying and relaxing when you want to do that as well.
Yeah,
so.
I'm just laughing because we did our honeymoon on a cruise.
Yes.
It was a gift from my parents, and we were so busy. There were so many activities that we wanted to do. It was almost like you had to be productive at having fun.
I was initially terrified of a cruise because the idea for me of being, stuck in one place for a few days on end was like, what do I do with myself?
Oh, there's a
Holy
lot
smokes,
to do.
there's a lot to do.
Yeah, it got to the point where if you didn't sign up for an activity right when they released it in the morning, all the slots were
you had to be on your game.
Like you had to be
which
on
is fun.
It was so fun.
Yeah.
So as you said, productivity with other things as well, right? You formulate this structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, at risk of going over, I think we should probably wrap up.
Yeah, there's so much to say on this topic, but this is, part of what we would like you to work on.
Yeah.
Try out those calendar techniques. We gave you 3 options, so check it out. There's some more suggestions on the blog as well for ways of being more productive at home and in life in general. So.
And we'd love your input. I mean, there are so many different ways to approach this, and you guys combined have so much knowledge as well.
Yes.
So,
and we value your comments. I mean, we got so many lovely comments on different videos.
Her favorite thing to do in the morning is to wake up and look at comments from you guys. So.
Yeah, it really warms my heart.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And we just passed 1,000 subscribers. So that wouldn't have been possible without all of you. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And, we'll keep it coming. You guys keep it coming. And
we'll all keep it coming.
Yeah, the train keeps rolling.
All right.
All right. Have a great weekend. And we will catch you in our next live.
Yes. Happy exploring.